Good morning.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are today.
Yeah, good
Good
evening too,
evening.
I
That's
guess.
right. I'm Dale.
I'm
I'm
Leslie.
Dale, and we're
I'm
ready
Le-
here to talk about trauma
yeah.
and healing. This
I
house.
do hear, Dale, before we start, there is, I think it's on your end, an echo. Can you hear it?
No, I can't. Let me
Okay.
go out and full screen and take a look.
Maybe lower the volume, see if that helps at
Oh,
all.
I can do. Yeah, I can do that.
I'm going to check
How's
my
that?
end. Better.
How's that?
Good. Good, good.
Okay. I had to use my sound box. Something's really messed up with my computer.
Yeah.
I have to get my.
Welcome to, yeah,
But
so
anyway,
everyone, welcome
here
to
we are.
Trauma to Love. And yeah, Dal and I are here just to discuss different aspects of trauma. Some people talk about, some others, some we don't talk about. And my passion, I've worked as a nurse for 30 years and I've always been pretty authentic and transparent. And I found that when we talk about the stuff that nobody talks about, it really helps people. And I don't like that word, but it helps them. It allows them to feel less alone in what they're experiencing, and so I always try to validate the negative before we switch it to a positive. So
And you do that how? Next, pot, uh,
I do that. Well, it's been a lifetime of practice, and it does take a lot of mental work. It doesn't now, but it did in the beginning.
mhm.
But I just, once I validate, and I gotta be honest with you, up until about 5 years ago, I did not validate for myself going, ooh, this feels horrible. I would say, this doesn't feel good, I'll do again, but that's as far as I took it. I didn't really sit with whatever the feelings were I had. And I think although I still was fine emotionally, I had healed from trauma, but it left stuff in my body that I had to get rid of. I always validated for other people. And what I mean by validating is if they have an experience that they don't want, instead of just saying, oh, well, look at the bright side, right? Because that helps nobody. It's kind of like a nurse saying, you'll be fine when you're on your deathbed. You're not going to be fine. So but anyhow, so validating is for myself, I'd go, this feels really crappy. And this doesn't feel fair. And I kind of let myself have a pity party for a certain amount of time. I usually do like 30 minutes. I'll go, okay, go feel sorry for yourself, do whatever for 30 minutes. And then once that's done, I want you to look at the gift and look for the lesson. Because if we can look for the lesson we're supposed to learn, it makes it kind of fun, kind of like a game. So I kind of look at life as a game and like, ooh, if I play it this way, how will it turn out if I play it this way? And I do the same thing with feelings and negative experiences in my life. I try to go, what's the good that comes out of it? What is it here to teach me? And then that takes away from, I've never been in the victim mode, and I think that's why.
Yeah,
Because I look at everything as a gift.
I played the victim for many years.
How's that make you feel when you play the victim?
When you play victim, it's so long since I've been there. It validated the reason for me to drink. It gave me a reason to drink.
Mhm. So when you were drinking, were you actually, I mean, I imagine you weren't feeling your feelings. You drank to numb them.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I
Yeah.
did in my groups and my individuals and sessions, I validated their emotions and their feelings by saying, it's okay, you have feelings and emotions, and you're entitled to feel them, all of it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not the emotion that gets you, it's what you do with it that gets you.
Yeah. And that's it. And, one of the things like you drank, and luckily, I mean, I drank in college, but I never got into really like, I don't drink socially and I don't do drugs. And just because I like to control my mind and I don't like the way I feel when I get buzzed, and I get buzzed really quickly. But my drug was loving other people because I knew like those feelings are hard when you're blocking yourself and I think in life, the gift is the pain. We were talking about this the other day. The gift is the pain
Mhm.
because the pain's where possibility is, and that's where we grow. But
Right.
the gift is the armor we wear to hide from the gift of pain, because the armor blocks our own pain in. And it also, I think that's when we take other people's energy in. If you've got a closed heart, I think other people's energy will get stuck within you. But if the heart is open, and by open, I'm talking like the heart chakra, and if the heart is open, our pain is able to release, but others' pain goes right through us. Like I worked with some really, they would call emotional train wrecks, and I never took it with me. As soon as I walked out of the patient's home, I could let it go.
Yep.
But
I have the same gift, but don't take
yeah.
it with you. Don't have it.
Well, the gift is an open heart. And it's funny, when I left work after 30 years in 2017 because I was following my intuition, and something inside me, that voiceless voice I always listened to, said, your work here is done. It's time to take the message out to the world. And I'm like, okay. And but the message is that, like, we can't do anything. We can't be ourselves and free ourselves if we can't see ourselves. And the only way to see ourselves is to open that heart and say, I've been doing this since I was 16. So for me, trying to hide myself is really uncomfortable. I can't wear the armor. But when I was 16, I went out in the world and I was like, I knew what I needed. I needed to be accepted and seen. And I didn't know how to get that. So I opened my heart and I said, here I am, world, like me or not. Come on, pain. I invited it. And when I invited it, it never came. You know what I mean? Like, because my perception of it shifted. It wasn't something to be avoided. It was really getting comfortable with anything uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, my pain came in waves. Even that's when I quit drinking, went into
Yeah.
therapy. It just came in wave after tsunami after tsunami after tsunami for years.
Yeah.
When I worked
Well,
with Dr. Phil, the same thing.
And I think that's normal, though. Like, I see, particularly in the past couple of years, since they talk about, neuroplasticity, which drives me nuts. But everything's so positive. It's got to be positive, and life isn't. Life is ebbs and flows. You know what I mean? I had a great life for 55 years, and then the last 5 have been hell. But that hell is making me stronger, so the next 20 or 30. But nobody tells us, or nobody says, hey, just because your life is hard and you're in pain doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's part of the process. It's part of the journey. It's part of the dance. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. It is a part of the dance.
Yeah.
You can't feel the good until you feel the bad.
Well, that's it. You don't even know what good is unless you know what bad is, right? And that's
Yeah.
if you were always happy, how would you know what sad was? And if you were, we need to experience one thing. It's kind of like I always tell kids when they're in high school getting out, and when they say, everyone's like, well, what do you want to do? I said, find out what you don't want to do. It's the easiest way to find out. But you you have to know what you don't want so you can find what you do want. And yeah, but we don't seem to talk about that much. Although, do you hear it? I'm not online. I'm not like, I don't follow the news. So
No,
maybe.
I'm not on that line. In that respect, I don't hear it at all.
Yeah.
Once in a while, I get something come across one of my news feeds, but it's rare. So I'm not that familiar with it at all. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I'm estranged from my children. So therefore, I'm estranged from my grandchildren who are about that age. That
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm missing out.
And you know what? You want to delve into that a little bit? Because with trauma, and I find this a lot with families, particularly when they come, adult children of parents with substance abuse or chronic mental illness or anywhere where the kid couldn't really be a kid, right? And we often do have kids who are estranged from us. And the hardest thing in the world, I remember when I was getting divorced, and my daughter, who was 14, when my ex left, she clung to my son, who was like 18. And he's like, Mom, she won't. And I knew she needed a male figure. But then my son went to rehab, and she all of a sudden clung to her father, and she moved out with him. And for the first 2 weeks, I was devastated. I'm like, what kind of mom am I? The only thing that, I just wanted to help my kids feel safe. And then finally, so I would just like text her every day going, hey, just thinking about you. That's it. Leave it simple to let her know. And after like 2 weeks, I talked to her one time. She goes, you were a great mom. You did nothing wrong. And all of a sudden, something slit. And I went, oh, okay, this isn't about me being a parent. It's about her needs. And I think that's where we get in trouble, because we think it's about us. And it's usually not 99.9% of the time.
Well, my son
So like,
cut me off and told me
Yeah.
to stay away. And my wife and grandchildren don't communicate in 2010.
Yeah.
All after I
No.
told them.
Yeah. And you know what? That may or may not have something to. Here's where I say it's not about you, because people say to me, well, what if so and so, I did something that angered someone and they're staying away. Point is, still, it's up to the other person to tell you why, and to be upfront about it. Say, Dad, listen, I just can't deal with it right now. Did he ever say anything, or just kind of ghosted you?
Just kind of ghosted me. All three of them at the same time.
Yeah, and that leaves you with making up stories in your head when you don't really even know why they ghosted you. You
No,
don't
I
know
have no
if,
clue. I have written
Yeah.
my oldest boy several times. I've
Yeah.
tried to call him several times. I've emailed him other types of electronic communications and gotten nothing back.
Right. So in your case, when I say it's not about you, it's not about you. It could be something you had done, but it's his issue because he
Yes.
can't communicate with you what it is. And
It's
we can,
absolutely his issue.
yeah. And there's so many parents who kids have been estranged that have no clue why. And, that leads to a lot of heartache,
Mhm.
because I don't know, everything in life is about trust and about being able to communicate.
Yeah, I
And
don't.
yeah, if
That's
we
the biggest
can't
part
do
of it.
that,
I don't know what, if I knew what it was, would alleviate some of the stress dealing with it.
yeah.
I
Well,
just
you
knew.
can't, even if there was some valid, right, even if there was some valid point, without knowing, you don't, like my daughter's kind of the same way. We're not estranged, but she's cool with talking like once a year. And I'm like, no, this isn't a relationship, But I've asked her, and she's like, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. And my God's telling me deep down there's a lot of stuff, but I don't know what it is. So just occasionally when I talk to her, I'm like, listen, I apologize for anything I may have done to make you feel unsafe. And sometimes it comes out. I don't know if I said this last week, please stop me. But when my daughter was 8, my mom died, and my mom and her were so close, and I thought my mom was going to be okay. I had seen my mom for a couple minutes before the ambulance took her, did like a neuro check, and I went, I don't think it's a stroke. I think she's probably just really dehydrated. So my kids were crying, and I said to my daughter, I think she's going to be okay. I think she just needs some fluids. And my mom died that night. And when I told my daughter, she let out this blood-curdling scream and then never spoke about it again. Took her to a therapist. He told me I was wasting my money. She never said anything. Now, she was 8. A few years ago, when she was in her mid-20s, I forget what we were talking about, but she was in the backseat of the car, and out of her mouth came, you told me Mom was going to be fine. And I went, son of a bitch. I lost her trust when she was 8. But if she had been able to say to me back then, you lied, you told me she could be okay, I could have explained to her, but I didn't know. So for her, that's probably the biggest trauma, why she doesn't trust me, because of that, and it's so crazy the way kids' perceptions of things,
Yeah.
and even adults. That's why it's so important to say what we mean and mean what we say.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know if that's the case with my boys.
Yeah.
But what's surprising is the oldest son does not get along with the youngest son, and yet they use identical words when they cut me off.
They use what? What was that?
Identical words when they told me to go away.
Oh, so
Sean was talking to Al.
mm,
Roger's close to no, it's the other way around. Roger is not close to Al. They're angry at each other since they were born. I brought Roger home from the hospital and been mad at Roger.
yeah. You know, parenting is so tough because no one tells you how to do it, right?
No,
And
no manual.
no, and generation after generation, if all we know is what our parents did, as much as how many times you go, I don't want to be my parents. I look in the mirror sometimes going, oh crap. Anyway,
My
you know,
dad,
right. Yeah.
that's what I
You know, it's what we know. And with trauma, a lot of that, you know, that's why our relationships suck. You know, I
Now,
have never been up.
I have no doubt there was emotional abuse of my boys when I was drinking.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
quit drinking years after we separated, after Marla and I separated. So I have no doubt there's not some emotional trauma. And that may be part of the problem.
Well, you know, and at that point, so I grew up, my dad was an addict and he was gambling, but it was still like the same manipulative emotion. Yeah,
Yes.
same mindset and same hurt he had. And my ex was, and then my son was. And so I've been around a lot of, you know, people who have addiction, substance use disorder. But that's where like you have to have someone go, it's not about you. It's not about you. And understand that the person at that time isn't well, you know? And the thing is with substance abuse, I always look as when my son signed himself into rehab, I started to get therapy for the first time in my life. And because I went, if he's not well, that means the whole family is not well. And it used to bother me because I'd go to all these meetings for parents and they're all blaming the person with the addiction. I'm like, yo, dude, it's a family disease. It is not a one person disease. Yes, that person picked up the drug or whatever, but it's why did they pick up that drug? You know what I'm saying? Like we just fix the addiction. We don't go like what caused those feelings that made you want to numb those feelings.
Another caller.
All right, now wait, you saw me put this on airplane mode. I have no clue what. I apologize. But yeah, but there's just so much in mental health, healthcare, people who want to quote unquote help other people. There's so many things that we don't delve into because it makes us uncomfortable. And that's why I think we never really get to the root of the problem. We just keep slapping band-aids. And the wounded.
Yeah, in my groups and treatment, my giving treatment, I would say, in giving the treatment that I was doing in my job, I attempted, and it was very unsuccessful in this case, to get the person to talk about the dynamics of the family. And usually I'm very unsuccessful at getting them to talk. They wouldn't open up.
Yeah, and if they're not ready, they're not ready. You're echoing again, so I don't know if you want to switch. It sounds on my end. It sounds a little underwater-ish. I'm not sure if anyone's listening.
Maybe I'm getting too far away from my microphone.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, and that is the thing. You know, if people aren't willing to open up, the only thing we can do is just love them in the space. And when I've done talks with, you know, codependent groups and addiction groups, I always say the one thing I really don't like about those groups, they work, but I don't like calling character defects.
Yeah.
Because first of all, the reason people who drink, or even codependents, anyone who doesn't have healthy coping mechanisms, they feel like crap about themselves to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Like we do enough good a job judging ours. And in reality, all those coping mechanisms were developed when childhood, when all you were doing was trying to stay safe. So
Mhm.
they're not character defects. They're coping mechanisms that worked as a kid that don't work as an adult. And so I have a problem with the very foundation is that we're so hard on one another. We're so quick to
Mhm.
judge instead of
Oh, Lord.
praising one another.
Yeah.
I try to give, I don't lie, but even when I pass people in the street, I will try to find something on their outwardly appearance I can make a comment. Because how often do we hear the good things about us? You know? And that really is the root of the problem. We all need to feel enough. We need to feel worthy. And know that worthiness comes with nothing we do. It's just who we
Mhm.
are.
I,
Sorry, I went off tangent
that's
there.
fine, that's fine. I, used to shock my clients because I tell them, I love you because you can't love yourself right now, and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it.
Yeah,
And they just,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
what?
Whip your hands in your screen. When I worked with women in as a nurse, I worked in public health with low income women on
Mhm.
welfare who were pregnant. And it's funny when I left work and I knew what I did for them. I loved them in the being. That was really it. I just created a safe space for them to be themselves so they could see themselves, so they could shift their perception and free themselves. That was it. And when I called them and said, what do I call myself? Because I didn't want to come out of work and be a coach. I was just a speaker, but that didn't seem to be good enough for people just to write speaker. So I said, what did I do for you outside of being a nurse? And they were all like, you taught me how to love myself. And I said, okay, can you tell me how I did that? Because that wasn't my intention. And yeah, I wasn't trying to do that. And they just said, well, you're a teacher, you're a parent, you're a friend, you're a nurturer, you're like a therapist. You just, whatever they needed, because my heart was open and I could sense, not think what they needed, I just felt
Mhm.
they needed. Because I always look at people and go, if that were me, what would I need? Because at the end of the day, as human beings, we all kind of need the same things, as far as emotional things. We need to feel valued, to feel worthy, to feel loved, to feel accepted for who we are. And
I, I did a group for 6 weeks. One of my coworkers got pneumonia and was out for
yeah,
6 weeks. And she had an all-female group, all minority, all social services. Had taken their children and put them in treatment for substance abuse. And it was the hardest group I ever did. However, it's what I learned the most from.
yeah. Well, and that's it. Yeah, it, if we could shift, one of the ways you'd ask how I shifted perception, there are a couple dozen things I over the past couple of years have actually sat down and tried to figure out how can I teach people to do this. And I call them the divine heart healings. But one of the things is I always I never send intention to do anything. I always just send intention, I guess, to it was a state of being. And one of them was I wanted to learn from every person. I wanted to learn something from every person I came in
Yeah.
contact with, whether it was a homeless person, a successful person. It didn't matter. I wanted to learn, and so by asking questions to them about themselves, I would learn about myself through their answer.
Yeah. I learned a lot
So
from several of my groups.
yeah, I love working with people who
Yeah, I do
have a
too.
lot of problems because most of them are authentic. I've struggled in the past 4 or 5 years because I've now no longer with people in public health on the patient end. I'm with the people who are dishing out healthcare
Yeah.
and mental health care and social services. And they got the armor so much, I don't even know how to deal with them because they're so blocked. It's like talking to it's almost like talking to like my dad back when it was, there's sets then, there seemed to be a set group of answers that you could get for questions, and no one goes beyond that. And it's almost like you're talking to a wall,
Yeah.
Do you experience that? We were going to talk about healthcare, but this might be a good time to transition into trauma and what it does for health, and where we run into problems with the system.
Right.
Yeah, because
I think we did a good thing by doing that for the first half hour. Let me go out of live stream to see if Deidre's here. No, she's not here yet.
Okay.
I sent her a link.
So just so the audience can know, like up until 2017, I left work. And from the time I was 16, which was 1978, until 2017, my life was amazing. It was the experiences with people, and just, I lived in the moment and only looked for joy. And I was super successful at doing that without really even trying. It was kind of like life was magic, right?
Yeah.
Because I was in that state of being love and just living in the moment. I left work 2017 to 2018 was still good because I was following my intuition. Then 2018, I thought, maybe I need to try to make a business out of this. My mindset at the time was, let me just go share this message and go back to my work. And so I tried to start a business, uncovered a lot of issues on the computer. Long story, but I ended up finding out old traumatic brain injury, all these learning challenges. So I had to then be a patient, not a nurse. And when I was a nurse, I saw a difference in nurses, the way they were with me versus patients. And I thought, their own stories are so getting in the way of us being able to truly be empathetic and compassionate to people. Because when we really get into their traumas, it makes us face our own. And if we're not faced, we can't, right? So since probably 2019, the beginning of 2019, I've been a patient, not a nurse. And let me just say for anyone out there with trauma, people have trauma, as a general statement, are not the problem. It's the people who are attempting to help. And again, not everybody. It's just I don't like making generalized statements. If I had to make a hypothesis of something, why we're in so much trouble, it's the judgment, the not listening, and it has nothing to do with people in trauma. So it is the last 5 years, I felt so disempowered facing being a patient, extremely disempowered. And and I had the knowledge of a nurse. I would walk out of visit, and it wasn't, let me just say, I did not come in contact with any registered nurses the last 5 years. It was more mental health providers, it was physicians, it was people in insurance companies, people who work for disability agencies. I just want to say it wasn't that I didn't come in contact with any nurses. So, but the only way to correct this, and Dale and I were saying before that, I can't wait for the system to crumble. I wish they would just let it go and stop hanging on, trying to save it, because it's not the system, it's the people who work in the system who don't feel safe with themselves.
Who have no clue what they're doing. Despite going to school, life's experience, everything, their own experience in the field, they don't. I totally concur with that statement.
Yeah. And I don't think it's they don't know what they're doing. It's they have not yet come to terms with their own traumas because they're wearing the armor. And that with the armor, they can't see themselves. And because empathy, and let's make it clear, empathy in my experience, empathy is not understanding someone's experience. Because I will never know what it's like to be Black. I'll never know what it's like to be a man. I'll never know but empathy is understanding the emotion that the experience generates. And if I look at empathy that way, I can empathize with anybody, whether I've been in their shoes or not. But there's such, I see both ends. I understand when you're so busy and, you know, I understand how it happens, but when I took this problem to management, nobody wants to hear the problem because they are the problem. So
Yeah.
what do you do to correct it? And the curriculum I wrote for systems to teach leaders, those who serve, and those who are served. Let's all learn the same thing on how to feel safe with ourselves,
Mhm.
because that feeling of unsafety, whether it be emotional and physical, real or perceived, that's what's harming our bodies and our minds. Feeling unsafe triggers that chronic toxic stress everyone talks about,
Yeah.
and the nervous system. Um, and I find how, I'm talking, I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
With that statement I just made, do you find sometimes with yourself that you might emotionally, mentally be in a good space,
Yeah.
but your body seems like it's almost going through withdrawal again? Did
No.
you ever get no? Okay. See, and I did, but I also, with the brain injury and the optic nerve, when my eyes are open,
Yeah.
my body never feels safe. And I think that's why going out in the world, hugging people, I think hugging, touching, connection allowed my sympathetic nervous system to calm down, feel safe. But what, and I don't know if you want to share, but with your traumas, have you had any of the issues like they're usually three that I've seen: Hashimoto's, which is the thyroid, some type of migraines or neurological. There's muscle involved fibromyalgia, MS, so yeah. But that autoimmune is really challenging because autoimmune is like our body's fighting our own
Yeah. And
body.
I think that's part of my physical health issue.
Yeah, well, that's
You
what
know
I'm
what I
saying.
mean?
That is the physical health. So sometimes over the past 5 years, I was pretty solid in my emotional and mental health, even though I'm stressed. But without with being faced with people with the armor and not connecting and not hugging people and not feeling
Yeah.
the world, my body just kind of, I would be tremoring from the inside out, going, "What the hell?" Like, if my thoughts are off, I know how to recorrect them. But if I'm in a happy space mentally, but my body's like miserable, I was like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what trauma is. And that stuff is really hard to diagnose. So you go to doctors, you feel crappy, things are off, but your blood work's fine. And they
Yeah.
say there's something wrong with you. It's emotional. So now you're judging yourself more because it's emotional. I'm telling you, a lot of it is not emotional. I don't, from my own experience. It was just, it was emotional in the sense of all the years I said I didn't validate my own feelings.
Mhm.
That was kind of emotional because all this stuff was stuck, energy
Yeah.
gets stuck in the body. And it was the neurodiversity, the fact that whenever I walk, my body feels unsafe, always will. Right. So sometimes we have, when our bodies are making us feel horrible, but it's not specific, like doctors can't find anything. We just have to really nurture the body if our thoughts are okay. And it's
Right.
not by working, I took hot baths. I like started touching and caressing myself, which worked one day for neck pain. I was like, oh, sweetheart. And I'm like doing my neck. I'm going, thank you for holding my head up all these years and carrying the weight. And the
Yeah.
pain went away. Um, and I started working. Did you ever work with your energy to try to move, like if you had an ache to try to move it
No.
mentally? That's really cool. That's
Right.
I moved a migraine. It took me like 2 hours to do it, and
Yeah.
as soon as I stopped focusing, but I think we just need to love bomb whatever's and
Yeah. I,
what I do. And you can try this next time you have pain too, is when a part of my body, when I'm in pain, I put my hand on my heart and close my eyes and I try to imagine the heart pumping blood and it's really oxygen rich. And I send that love and the blood. I just visualize it. I don't know, but I visualize it and I send it to that part of the body.
Mhm.
And it doesn't work with migraines anymore, but it does work if I just have a general ache and a pain.
I've got leg pain. Like I fell yesterday. Out on the
What's
ice.
that?
I fell. I fell when I was out on my cleaning my
Fell.
car. Yeah. When I was cleaning my
Oh,
car, I slipped on some
yeah.
ice, and my leg is hurting like the devil today.
Well, do it.
So
Start touching it, caress, because it makes
I
so
have been.
yeah. And talk to it. I know it sounds
And I
crazy,
just
but the healing touch is so important to the body.
yes, it
So
is.
important. And there are people out there who do have families, but there's so many people who live alone out there that a touch and a hug can like go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that was I here's a crazy thing with trauma. They talk about the nervous system and chronic stress. So I'm throughout when I said from 16 to up till 2017, my life was amazing. I perceived it to be amazing, and it
Mhm.
was. There were a lot of health issues, chronic ones, but they never took me down. Acutely, they would show up, but I would bounce right back. One year I had 8 surgeries in a year,
Yeah.
never missed a day of work. And I was fine throughout them. They didn't take me down. And I think what happened was that feeling one with the world tricked my brain and body were like working together, and it tricked my body into thinking it was in something called homeostasis, which means it's working really well. When in homeostasis, all my blood work came back fine. Even when I was hemorrhaging, my hemoglobin was fine. When I had obstruction, no test picked it up. Once I stopped hugging and knowing my body was able to feel safe through hugging other people, all these things which never took me down came to the surface and took me down.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Just trying to give an example of how important it is, particularly if you've had trauma or your body's been living in that state of high alert all those years. Human interaction or your own interaction and the touch is so important to keep our bodies regulating.
Human or social animal.
Yeah. I don't know if you see the teddy bear in the background.
Yeah.
A
Mine
couple
is.
years ago, I bought my daughter a teddy bear and I was carrying around the store and I'm like, oh, this feels kind of good. And then she lives across the country and it was like $100 to mail it. I'm like, oh, forget it. I'll send her one from Amazon. So I kept this baby. I'm telling you, he saved my life. He doesn't talk back, but it's something to hug and just, it's like weighted blankets, same idea.
Well, if you ever get out here and see my room, you'll see over my bed, I've got a whole menagerie, not
Yeah.
just teddy bears.
Yeah.
Geese.
Do you hug them though?
Yes,
Yeah.
they
And
lie on
people,
my bed. Absolutely.
yeah.
These two are glued. These two are glued
Women
to
will
my
say to me, you're like 60 years old, you have a teddy bear? I'm like, yeah. So who
bed.
says just because we're kids anymore, we don't need something to outside of ourselves to comfort us with um, so because trauma and health is really, really tough because your health actually, I mean, our health started the day we were conceived. When you talk about epigenetics,
Yeah.
if you're, I mean, that the ACEs study, which was the CDC Adverse Childhood Experience study, which is what triggered everything about the nervous system and chronic stress, because the study proved that brains and bodies change when a child chronically feels unsafe, real or perceived, emotionally or physically. So that's where all this stuff came from. And but so we're dealing with health issues now that have been brewing. If we're in our 50s and 60s, they've been brewing for decades. And yeah, and they say, what's his name? I can never pronounce it. Bessel, that Body Keeps the Score. It was a book on trauma. And I was on a Zoom call with him once. He said it takes at least 10 years to clear the body of the effects of trauma. But the hard thing is, it just doesn't take 10 years. It takes 10 years of feeling loved, safe, and secure. I look at homeless people and I'm like, how can they ever get ahead when every day their bodies literally are living in survival mode? It's very
Not
hard.
only that, we're getting all the feedback from other people, calling
Right.
them names.
Spitting on them.
Yeah.
I sat with a homeless guy once, and it was on New Year's Eve in Philly, not New Year's Day, and we were at a parade, and I was sitting next to him, and people were still spitting on him.
Yeah.
It was a young kid, like in his 20s. I'm like, what if that was your child? Would you want somebody doing that to your child? And it takes very little to perhaps improve somebody's day. It takes
cups like this. Used to buy cups
Eddie.
like this.
Yeah.
But that was Eddie Bauer, but there were other brands too. And fill it full of coffee. Walk the streets and give them to homeless people.
Yeah.
Just
Look,
you need a cup of coffee. You look like you need a cup of coffee. Here. Take a drink, cut and hand it back. And I said, no, sure.
Or, sometimes I'll just go up and be like, look, I'm sorry I don't have any cash because I usually don't carry cash. I can go buy something, but would you like a hug or you want a conversation? And when I was in Philly and I would routinely, because since I worked in really bad neighborhoods, I would always sit down and have conversations with homeless people. And most of them told me that what really helped the most was when people did take the time just to acknowledge them. They're human beings, and they're little things. So I've always done little things to help people or to let them know they're not alone. And at least in that moment, somebody saw them. And I do that not because I'm some wonderful person. I do that because I've spent most of my life alone. I know what it's like, right? And so one of the things I do now are these hearts, and on the back it has a little mirror and says I see you. Another one are rocks. It's just a rock that has a love sticker on the back. It says you rock. I'll go up to strangers and I hand this to them. Mm-hmm. I'll just go stranger and say, hey, you rock. Or I'll give them this. I say, look, in case, you can't find people with open hearts, here's mine. Take it, carry it with you. People cry.
Mm-hmm. I bet they do.
They cry.
No doubt that they don't cry.
And here's number one, it fills my heart to fill somebody else's heart. I think we look at helping people as it's only serving them.
Yeah.
When you hold a space for someone else to feel seen, you're being seen.
Yeah.
It's both people win. And that's the kind of thing why I quit work, the message to share. But it's so hard because everyone knows it, yet no one wants to take time to do it or hear it. And that's I've been shut down for the last 5, to be honest with you, I've been shut down, told I was too much, whatever. And that's, I see the effect that has now. Because I've been so strong my whole life, gotten through stuff most people would never, because I never had a support system or really a lot of friends. And in the last 5 years, my confidence, everything went down because I wasn't being seen by my own profession or, health and mental health.
Yeah.
So look, I'll be friends with any homeless, drug addict, prisoner any day. Who's authentic. I'll be friends with anyone who's authentic, even if they're not successful, over someone who is and not authentic. Because when you're not authentic, nothing, love can't be expressed. Where do you feel because you live alone, right?
Yeah, I figured it out one day. I'm 73 years old. And I figured it out one day here a few months ago. I have been alone almost 50 years of that 73.
Yeah. So where do you get your love from? Because I know self-love, but self-love only goes so far. In the last 5 years, I've been more self-aware, more self-connected, more in love with myself. I think I'm great. I really value myself, which I don't think I did the rest of my life, but I am not fulfilled and kind of miserable and I love myself. I need other people. We need.
We do. Humans need
So,
other people. I've got
so,
weather
so
plenty support system.
you
I
have,
only have one
I miss,
plenty support system. I
mm,
have friends all over the United States that I can call. I have a
yeah,
next daughter-in-law that I still claim as my daughter-in-law, as my son, but that's
that's
a joke.
awesome.
But I still call Tammy my daughter, and she calls me father-in-law. Calls
Yeah.
me Papa.
See, that's
Her
cool.
kids
See,
call me Grandpa. I've got that.
that's
I've got my
awesome.
sister, who's the last member of my family.
Hmm.
I have my kids. They're out of the picture. But Gwen, my sister, which reminds me, before I forget it, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to give your phone number to my sister
Yep. Please.
in case something
Yeah.
happens to me. She can get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd
And
let
I'll
you
give
know.
you my sons because, like, Dale was saying he's got support. I have a few good friends, but one of the things about the way I live my life is no one truly understands me, right? Like, they all think I'm a little eccentric. And with traumatic brain injury, I have autism and all these other things that
Yeah.
I can be exhausting 24/7. I found that out about myself the last few years. Just even the physical stuff, I'm constantly dropping things. I'm like, because of traumatic brain injury. So I've always had a lot of friends, but not really, really close friends, and they're all kind of successful. So they're the people in the last 5 years, I would call the network that I had I got them more from birth zone development and they were entrepreneurs. I'd say, listen, can you just hold a space for me? I need to get all this stuff out of my head. And I don't need you to tell me what to do. I know what to do. It's just I talk to people, for a while there. I was only talking to people once every few weeks. Like stuff gets in your head. And I couldn't find anyone to hold that space. Inevitably, I would start saying what was wrong and people would start telling me what to do. And I'm like, now I know what I did. So the gift of all that was that I finally found out what I did. I hold a space. No matter, I hold a space for the dark so people can see their light. And that's what we're supposed to do. I know from a divine purpose, that is what we are here to do for
Yeah.
one another.
I have so many friends that would hold space for me and have.
Yeah. I have
Really
two.
not-
You and we just met.
Yeah.
But I have two. And the other poor girl over the
by
past
one.
I wouldn't call her because I'm like, oh my God. And I'd say, please let me hold space for you. She goes, well, I don't like to share my stuff. And I'm like, well, let me be of value to you. I don't always want you holding a space for me because then I start to feel like a burden. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it needs to be reciprocal. But I think people who can hold a safe space feel safe with themselves.
Yes.
Do you agree?
I totally agree with you. It's
Yeah.
got to be, I mean, if it's not reciprocal, it's not real.
Yep. Yeah.
It's phony. And that drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Phoniest of people. Yeah, I'm there for you. When you call them, they're busy or whatever. You don't want to do it. But I've got some friends that are just call 24/7. They'll be there for you.
Well, I even with a couple girlfriends when I lived back in Philadelphia, I'm in California now. I said, let's do a 411 because it was during COVID.
Yeah.
And I said, 411 means I need to talk to a human being. I don't need a long conversation. I just need to hear a voice to know I'm not alone in the world. And it didn't work. I tried, it didn't work. But I mean, that's kind of what we need, like a phone chain where not only a conversation, but just in the moment to know you're not alone in the world. Like there are a lot of people that live alone or isolated and that's brutal on health, And I think it's common in people with trauma because I think we have a lot of neurodiverse issues, which means we are different. The neurodiverse brain is different than neurotypical brain. And so relationships are different. When you're authentic, people who aren't authentic don't sometimes get intimidated by authenticity. And so they don't want to be near you Because they see in your authenticity, they see in you what's deep down inside of them, what they're not letting free. And so you're a reminder of who they are, but they're not being true to themselves. So they don't want to be around you. So I think those are things where trauma really carries on and on and on. And it's not a flaw that trauma people. Authenticity is never a flaw. Never, ever. But because of that, it just continues the body feeling unsafe. And I just need a big love fest. What do you think?
I think it's marvelous. I think we've had a great time here, but I need to say a couple of things.
Yeah.
I've been invited to a podcast, a regular podcast, by somebody else in trauma, and they want to interview me because of this show.
Awesome. What's the name of? You'll have to let me know when it's on so I can listen to it.
Yeah, I will. It's not like.
What's the name of the
podcast? Give me a break. I haven't looked at it yet.
Okay,
I will invite Dee to go back and find out what happened. I may have sent it to the wrong email address. The link.
So listen. So who's when's your interview? Is it live or are they?
No, it's not live.
Okay. All right. But one of the things, Dale, the reason Dale, and I have to, Dale, I love you because you're one of the few people that was willing to hop on a podcast and just have a conversation that was unstructured, that people may or may not find value because some people may listen to this and go, oh, that's crap, it's a waste of my time. But there are other people that are going to be like a fly on the wall. One of the things my whole life would seem to really hold a space and transform people was a conversation. I'm like, what am I saying? And it wasn't, there was no agenda except for to get to know somebody else, and I may never see them again.
Right.
But that a conversation can be transformational when people are allowed to be themselves.
Right.
Because all of a sudden you feel what it's like to be free.
Yeah.
And that allows you to shift perception of yourself and everyone else. And so the reason I'm saying this is I want to do these community conversations. I mentioned before, I have a real hard time with maneuvering the computer. So I'm kind of lost. I haven't figured out how to maneuver this world without technology.
You're doing great today.
I'm okay this because you're doing all the back end. All I did is show up. Right. But what I'm saying, if there's anyone out there who wants to do community conversations and pull communities together or a group of people together, I'll be more than happy to facilitate these.
I think there is one. I think Deva's got one.
Yeah.
She has 6 friends she wanted to invite. I told her to go ahead.
Yeah. I've been handing, I have little flyers that I've been handing. Maybe I can send you the thing and maybe you can put it on the website I've been handing out to community centers.
Yeah. Well,
because in order on a global level, I mean on a we level, the only things have been really tough. And I think they're going to get tougher. And the only way we're going to survive this is if we start talking and together.
Bypassing the system.
Bypassing the system, talking about what's in our heart, what we're afraid of. If I meet anyone now and they're like, oh no, everything's great, life's great, there's no bullshit. Because in the back of your mind, what is happening to the world? Like, you want to talk about not feeling safe and that underlying feeling of unsafety that has nothing to do with Dale and nothing to do with me. It has to do with the world around us that seems to be falling apart and going crazy. That triggers fight, flight, or freeze. And that, here's the amazing, I'm sorry, this is just such my passion, but I can't find anyone else who can do anything about it with passion, right? But when my son's generation, so he was born in 91, but this is the first one of kids to really have access to the internet. They were kind of a foot in both worlds. But when he was 24, was diagnosed with insulin-dependent diabetes, juvenile diabetes at age 24, no family history of diabetes. I'm like, what? Spin, worked out, whatever. And I looked and I went, oh my God. I talked to the doctors where I was hospitalized at Penn, and I'm like, listen, have you been seeing this a lot? They're like, it's epidemic proportions. I'm like, oh, late onset juvenile diabetes in kids my son's age. It's what they've seen on the internet. It's making them feel unsafe, which is putting them into, and then I saw a CDC study back then that pre-college kids, pre-diabetic was up 25%. So whether we are emotionally stable and no trauma, whatever, it doesn't, in today's times, what is going on in the world is enough reason for us to talk about this stuff and to say, yes, I'm scared. I have kids. What is their future going to be like?
I got grandkids and kids.
Yeah, politicians. If at any point in time we need to learn to trust ourselves, to take the armor off, to trust, because you can't trust yourself if you're wearing the armor. It's impossible. And we need to be able to trust ourselves, because with AI, you don't even know if what you're hearing is really the person you're hearing.
Right.
You know,
AI the other day.
What was that?
I was experimenting with AI the other day on one of my.
Were you? Yeah, I haven't. But I think, what was it? I don't know. Maybe six months ago, I forget the group, but my son was telling me about some group that came out with a hit record. It wasn't them. They didn't write it. They didn't sing it. It was in their name.
Well,
so if the world
offline, but we can continue this conversation offline.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just, you know me, I could talk for
hours. I can too.
Hours.
I'm gonna make a pit stop because.
So, all right. Well, listen.
I want to do that. I'm gonna go offline now and then just hang around.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to hang on? Okay.
Yeah,
all right. But we're signing off. So for people, we'll be back same time next week.
Yes.
On Monday.
I was going to ask you, do you want